I'd like to say welcome, 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 sending you all a triple welcome. This is the Journey to Healing the Heart podcast by your girl, Audreia Joseph, the Forgiveness Godmother. And I really am so excited about doing this. We are going to have some amazing guests, and I have one today by the name of Dr. Ava Brown. Now, this program is all about forgiveness. We're speaking everything forgiveness and self-love. Now, I'm going to be asking some prominent people. I'm going to be also bringing in some experts. We're going to bring in the science of forgiveness. We're just going to talk everything forgiveness in conversation. So, Dr. Ava Brown, welcome as my first guest.
Oh my God, I feel so special to just be on the sofa with you today. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. It's such a beautiful honor. So we are speaking forgiveness. As you know, one of my clients named me the Forgiveness Godmother, right? And this was born out of the book behind me as well, through yourself, Forgiveness, the Journey to Healing the Heart. And I've been so longing to do this. I have been bursting at the seams to do it for ages. But, self held me back for a moment, but here I am, raring and ready to go. So, Dr. Brown, I want to start off. So if you see me looking down, I have a series of questions that I want to ask you.
Start hiding, right?
Hey, here we go. When you hear the word forgiveness, what does it mean to you?
Wow, that's a great question. I think a lot of people hear forgiveness and they think, it's about the other person. I think forgiveness is a process that is really necessary for you to grow. And I think I've learned from you and other scholars, but that forgiveness is all about me. And I used to think it's about other people. So I think forgiveness, when I hear forgiveness now, before when I hear to learn, no, who's doing that? No. But now when I hear forgiveness, I think it's going to be helping me. And I think it's birthing something new in me. So when I hear forgiveness, I think freedom and growth and me, my self-worth.
Lovely.
And growth.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
So what did forgiveness look like when you were growing up? And were you taught to forgive whilst growing up?
Do you know what? You always ask me these questions and put them into what did it look like when I was growing up? When I was growing up, I don't think let me talk about my family, because I think that's probably what you mean as well.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Within my family, forgiveness always came out of my mom beating you and then tell you that you deserved it.
Oh, wow.
And it was, you did something wrong to get it. So forgiveness was, I didn't really see much in my family growing up, if I'm honest. I remember I have my auntie who actually named me, and forgiveness, I grew up remembering, and I learned last week Sunday that he actually left my auntie after all of that. I grew up seeing forgiveness mean that my uncle-in-law cheated on my auntie all the time with somebody in the area. And then my auntie would compete and fight with the other girl as a way as winning back her husband. And then she would give herself to him, and that, or he would buy her something, and that was forgiveness. But he always had both women. And that replicated itself in my family through many aunties, actually, when I think about it now. In my wider life, as I grew in my younger years, forgiveness meant that when people did something, especially adults, it was adults, when they did something, their way of seeking forgiveness was an item, objectified, right?
A lot of us tend to think that is forgiveness, giving a physical thing, because, you touched on a point. We're not taught as children, not really. I mean, I'm going to ask you a question again in a moment about being a parent as well and forgiveness. But I recognized in that when my children were smaller, if one did something to the other, I'd say, go and apologize. So we gave a command, but we actually didn't say, well, why did you do that? Break it down, into its smallest pieces. So I think that what we've learned as adults, from children into adulthood, is forgiveness by default.
Yes.
because we actually weren't being authentic as children. We weren't taught to authentically apologize. So we've grown up into adults and it becomes an object, or maybe you'll give your brother or your sister, if you hit them, maybe sweet or calm down, and we apologize because we don't want to be on the wrong side of our parents. So we have never taught to forgive authentically. Do you agree?
I do agree, actually. I don't know if this is the moment where I bring in the parent part.
Carry on. I want you to just move through.
But I agree with you that it's objectified again. It's almost like it's not real. It's doing it because you're told to do it. As a parent, I'm a parent twice over with a wide gap, as you guys probably know. And for those who don't know, I've got 2 children. One is 22 this year. Oh my God, the age and one is 8. So there's a huge paradigm between them. And with my daughter, I did a lot of things wrong. I did a lot of things with my daughter, and it impacted our relationship, how I was taught. And as I got more cultured and aware, and more tuned in and tapped into who I am, meeting people like yourself, I parent differently. I'm not perfect at it. I don't think anybody is. But I parent differently with my son. So my son gets me admitting when I'm wrong. He gets me putting up my hands and saying, I dropped the ball. And when I started with my daughter, actually, when she was in her later teens. It was a bit late, but I started anyway. And I do it now even. But it was hard. It was so hard, Audrey, especially as somebody who grew up in the Caribbean, Jamaica, in fact, where you're the adult, kids are seen, not heard. And I grew up in that era. So it was very difficult for me, but now it's second nature for me to say, I got it wrong. Mommy's sorry. I dropped the ball. I'm sorry. Can you forgive me? Do you understand? And it's a dialogue rather than it being a command and a force. And my son very well. He's very much into he wants to talk things out to the last thread, which sometimes. Not always, but then you can't have it 2 ways. You can't want to teach them to be self-expressed and then so
then shut them down.
There's a leaner line, but forgiveness with my children in parenting is different now, definitely different.
Yeah, and we change as we grow up and as our experiences shape us, our opinion. So we're actually not even the person we were yesterday, and our views and opinions shift. So the lens we see the world through is completely different to maybe say 5 years ago. So even our impressions of forgiveness. This is the reason why I wanted to open this kind of conversation, so that people could actually start looking at forgiveness from a different perspective, through different lens, because, generally we're not really taught about forgiveness. Forgiveness is usually the thing that's on the back burner. So we actually don't recognize how it impacts our lives moving forward, how it impacts our health and our mental health. Because at times we think that the way we are is our personality, and it could well be an unforgiveness issue. Thank you, Ava. I'm just loving this conversation. I'm absolutely loving it. Now, what I'd like to ask you, I already know some of this, but for our listeners and viewers, I'd like you to tell me, what is one of the biggest things that you've ever forgiven?
Oh my God, I've forgiven so many. I think forgiveness became more prominent in my adulthood, right? So I think my forgiveness journey has been the last 6 to 7 years. Like, if I were to look at it honestly, I sit here today unapologetically, and this. There's nobody that I hate. There's nobody I have up in my. We used to say, "You're in my cra," in the cra.
In that place.
Yeah, I have nobody up in my heart. There's nobody who I carry anymore. And I can actually say that and feel so honest about it, right? There are people who I feel indifferent towards. There's a difference between that. But I used to hate people. I used to be angry. I used to think about them. You remember this, and my chest would tighten. Now I can talk about them, and I actually have a smile, and I'm being genuine. There is absolutely nobody on the planet that I
love the physiology. You've just mentioned the physiology about the unforgiveness, how your chest would tighten. Yes. And I'm aiming to bring people who know the science about these kind of things onto this program because I want people to understand how it can affect your health, because you've just mentioned your chest.
I used to have a mark here, and I'm having, not because I'm a bit stressed, but I use it, my forehead is a big sign for me. And we talk about my forehead all the time. My forehead tells me two things. I'm either tired, stressed, or I'm in an unforgiving state, like no joke. And so I used to have this very sunken thing right here, like you could put water in there. And it was in the moment when I was going through my second divorce, and I hated my ex-husband. I actually hated the guy. Like, genuinely, you've been on that journey, you got it. And my chest would tighten. And he would write me an email, and I would be, and now he writes me, and I don't even respond. I take days to respond because you're not that important anymore, right? So just to come to your question, the two hardest things I've had to forgive, three actually, was my father sexually abusing me, probably four. And every time I come across, I'm about to call the guy's name, one of the guys who sexually, abused me at gunpoint. And so there are four big major things in my life I've had to forgive. My father, who abused me sexually, being raped at gunpoint, those men, especially one in particular, and my ex-husband, the last one, for what he did to me, like he literally destroyed or tried to destroy my life. And my other ex-husband for having a child when we're still married. And those are four big things. They're massive things. And lately, a fifth one is added to it. I think as we grow, two people who I trusted who've robbed me over £100,000.
Wow.
Those are massive
These
things.
are such big things. And, that actually nicely leads me on to asking you, do you think there is anything that is unforgivable?
No. I think when you come from a space, and I can talk about this so empowered now, thanks to my good forgiveness godmother. And it's true, Audrey, you've done a lot of work on me, you know that. When you come from a space of understanding that you are not doing yourself any good from not being forgiven, then it's no longer, it's not even a question. It is about how much do I have the kind of love for myself? Do I have the kind of love for myself, right? The deep core self-love for Ava, that I'm going to allow somebody else to damage my physiology? And do I have the space to harbor such nonsensical things in a way? How long will I carry around this piece? T.D. Jakes says something that I always love. He says, you're sitting there talking about the man who hurt you 25 years ago. Like, seriously? And I remember one day I heard that sermon, and it jarred me. You have to have the kind of heroic self-love, heroic self-love to understand that I deserve to fly. And Audrey, you've seen the massive things that I think I've actually grown more since I've been able to let these people go physically, mentally, and in my businesses as an entrepreneur and all the things I do. So no, there's nothing I can't forgive. No, definitely not.
Wonderful. So that is fantastic. I love it because, I've coached for so long, and I know that there are so many stories out there, so many situations and happenings. And for every story that someone could say to me, I could never forgive that, I can find them the example of a person who has forgiven. Because being the forgiveness godmother and people knowing that that's my specialist subject, they tend to send me videos and articles and scientific information around the areas of forgiveness. So I have a myriad of stories, things that possibly even myself, there would have been a time when I'd be like, oh, you forgave that. But then when I found myself in this space, I recognize that once you have an open heart and a willingness, forgiveness finds you.
Do you know, I love it because I remember when, and I used to be very critical of, not critical, but like, oh my God, she took him back. How could she take him back? You know, especially in the Caribbean where, you want monogamy and all that kind of thing. And I remember when I found myself in the space, and I remember I felt embarrassed to take my ex-husband back, which I did, after he had been, unfaithful in terms of having we had problems obviously, but to get a child while we're still married, because I always hoped for reconciliation. And that was hard. I remember when I was moving to London, and I remember, you know, we're in the bed, we just made love. I'm gonna go to the airport in a minute, and his baby mother, who just had his baby, was on the door, knocking the door down. I was torn. So I've explained all that in my book. I was really torn because I'm a woman. I want my husband, but I also I'm a mother. I understand that, and I was so torn. And I forgave him for all of that and took him back. So, and it's hard. It's so hard. But I remember sitting in the space of judgment years prior. And so I said to people, don't sit in the space of judgment, because you never know when.
And it's a boomerang. It's a boomerang. I've been privy to that experience myself, where you threw something out in judgment and you thought it had gone, but it's a boomerang. It comes back to you, you know. But that is just one. You know what, Ava? I'd like to ask you this. How did you know that you forgave?
I know that I forgave. Well, in a couple of them, I know that I forgave. Here's the thing. I'm gonna say this. When I forgave my ex-husband, let's take the more recent one right now. Like, okay, let's take the money that I lost. That was wrong. I knew that I forgave, especially one of them more than the other initially, when I was writing about it, which I'm writing this series, and I was writing about it from a place, and I couldn't get you remember, I remember the producer saying to me, I need you to come angry. But I wasn't angry anymore, so I couldn't write it from an angry place. And I remember even saying to you, Audrey, I can't write it from this angry place because I'm writing when I no longer feel that way. So I knew that, because when I was now, putting it on paper or regurgitating it, it was in a different language or different emotions. My emotions were different about it. And I knew I've forgiven the person because I've moved on and I've started rebuilding. My ex-husband, the one that my last ex-husband, I knew I forgave him when he never impacted me anymore. When he would send an email and I was like, oh, I'm not answering that right now. Oh, can't be bothered. Or when he said he had a child, I remember receiving the email and it didn't have any impact, because I used to feel cold sweat, and your body shiver, and you suddenly feel clammy, and all those things. And I got the email that he had a child, and I was actually glad. I was relieved. And how I responded to him, which you were privy to, I was congratulatory and I was genuine about it. So you can feel it in your body, your mind, your senses, your physiology will tell you, and your emotions around it shifts, and that's when you know that is truly forgiven. And when you can also converse with the people, if you come into contact with them, you know.
There are certain things that I will be speaking about through this, about certain signs of unforgiveness, certain things to look out for, because we may be going through life thinking, oh, I've got chest pains, and you're taking tablets, but you're not realizing that it's an unforgiveness issue, or I've got a constant migraine, so it's wonderful to hear that. But the people who are listening, Ava, it's well and good for us to sit here and we talk about forgiveness, but someone's sitting there thinking, I've had this done, I've been sexually abused, you've spoken about that, I've gone through divorce, I've been a battered wife, I've gone through DV, I could be a man, whatever it is, I could be broken in some way, some damage has happened, and we're living in the past. And they say that what makes your belief system and who you are basically between the age of 0 and 4 or 7 nowadays, talking about that. So a lot of the stuff that we hold on to has been shaped from those ages. And some of it now, our behaviors are unconscious.
The formative brain teacher, and I know that the formative years are so important. They shape a child's life, and and as you delve into, like, I'm in a space now where I'm looking at my life, for example, and this is not digressing, but the segueing and leading up to that, where I've realized that I've lately realized that I've got commitment issues, right? And I realized I've got commitment issues as I started to write my poetry book, and realizing that, oh my God, I moved so many times. Between 0 and 6, I had moved so many times, and realize how that shapes me. So when you constantly are moving, there's no stability in your life. You don't put down roots, because And that's something I'm working on right now. You know, I'm in talking therapy.
Yeah.
But I realized that the formative years does so much to you.
Everything impacts you. Every experience that we have ever gone through our whole entire life,
Yeah.
even if we act as if it didn't have an impact, our unconscious mind takes it on. And every single thing shapes us, from our beliefs, how our judgment, our attitudes, it shapes so much about us.
Yeah.
Now, Ava, what I'd like to ask you is this: what are your forgiveness methods? What methods do you use to get to forgiveness?
Well, I'm a single mom, and so the first thing I think about are my kids. Like, I need to live as long as I can for them, and I get teary when I talk about them because they mean everything to me. And my daughter has got mental health challenges, so I need to live for a long time to help support her. My son hasn't got, you know, he doesn't know anybody on his father's side, so I need to live for those kids. But I also love Ava, and I've fallen in love with Ava more as I get older. And so it's important. But more importantly, I realized I had to ask myself, like, what am I benefiting from holding on to this? Like, is that energy being used in the right way? Could I use it to do a Facebook Live? Because it takes so much energy to hold that pot of, it's a pot, right? And this pot, and it's a pot, and the more you add to the pot, the bigger, you know, and it spills over into other areas of your life. So I didn't want to go into my new relationship when I find that man, or wherever you are, you might be watching this right now. Whenever I find that man, I didn't want to go over with all this stuff into my relationship. I don't want to parent my son from the point that I have his father in my heart, because we don't realize that sometimes, especially in like those kind of relationships, Audrey, when we have that residual of the other person, and we're dealing with our children, we can sometimes deal with them from that space of the unforgiveness that we can't over here for the other partner. So a lot of times relationships with even parents and children is as a result of the unforgiveness that lingers about how you feel about your ex-partner over here. So I realized that I wasn't going to show up at my highest self as a parent, an entrepreneur, a friend, a mother, and a lover of myself if I continued in that space. And so I had to now look at myself. And Audrey, from time to time now, I do an audit.
I love that. Go for it. Share with the audience
of where I am. I do, and you've taught me how to do that check, like without realizing. You've taught me, like I was talking about something the other day, I was thinking, how do I feel about this? Is it unforgiveness, or is it just being real? And so I do a check, an audit, so an unforgiveness audit. So those are some of my methods.
I love that. I love that unforgiveness audit. People, are you listening? An unforgiveness audit. We're going to go through some of this on here. We're going to go through some blueprints. We're going to go through all of that. So I love that. It is. So Ava, you do an internalized check, or are you doing a written one as well?
I do three things. I do a physical check, how my body is feeling, because how am I getting swampy? Am I getting upset about the issue? I sometimes write letters. So you remember I went on this course called Landmark. And I had to call my ex-husband, and I had to do that whole unforgiveness piece where I had to tell him that I forgave him, but also ask for his forgiveness. And not all forgiveness processes require you to reach out to the other person.
Yeah,
and that's great.
That's right.
I write it down. I sometimes take action, massive action, to then let the other person know that, look, we're cool. And then I also do the internal checks. There's a number of different pieces, and everybody's way is going to be different. It's going to vary, but those are what worked for me.
Oh, thank you so much. The listeners will really appreciate that, because you see, we talk forgiveness, but we don't speak about methods. And so we leave people lost. But you know that you and I, especially, are solution-orientated people. So we like to share methods. I'm a simple 1, 2, 3 step. Now, Ava, we're winding down, but I really thank you. I truly thank you for being my first guest. I feel really so excited. Now, I just want to ask you one thing. I've got my creative head on. I'm an artist. So I'd like to ask you a final question before we go. If forgiveness was a color, what color would it be for you? You see, I'm a color therapist as well, so I like to hear these kind of answers.
One of the colors that I find myself wearing a lot lately, and that's gray. I wear a lot of gray these days because I want it to be calm.
Hmm.
I want it to be calm and approachable and gentle. So it probably would be
Okay.
gray. Yeah.
Right. You see, that is down to interpretation because someone else would say gray represents something else on the opposite spectrum. But I love that for you. You know, you're saying gray.
When I put gray on, I don't know. You probably know I wear a gray lady, and I buy a lot
Yeah,
of. And you know, gray is one of my strong colors. I don't know. There's something about gray that I find so calming.
that's right.
It's just not a loud color. It's calm. It still has some color in it, but it's very. When I put gray on,
Muted, muted.
you know this about me. But even when I talk about my bedroom is gray. Remember, my last bedroom is a gray.
Yeah.
Whenever I put gray on, it has this calmness for me. So
And you know, I like gray. Look at my lounge. Look
I wear
behind.
a lot of grays. I wear a lot of grays. And even most times up here, my eyes are gray. I just find that gray does something to me. I just don't understand. So it would be gray because for me, gray represents calm.
Beautiful. And so that's the thing that you always hold in your mind whenever you feel stressed, that particular color for yourself, energy. That is beautiful, Ava. I want to truly thank you. You know, we're doing popcorn. This podcast is very much popcorn. We fly in, we give you some information, we're going to give you some statistics. I'm going to bring you some amazing guests, such as Dr. Ava Brown. I truly want to thank you for sharing. And I want to thank our sponsors as well. Our sponsors, who is the Mango Girl. They've sponsored us. And Simply Sunny Health, my sponsors, I want to thank them because they've just believed in me. And the Mango Girl, if you'd like to know, is also Dr. Ava Brown. So if you check the Mango Girl out online, it's a natural organic product. Also, Simply Sunny Health is a natural organic mineral, which I take.
Yeah. Okay, so you go real quickly. The Mango Girl actually came out of part of the angry, not forgiving issue. It was therapy. So
Yes.
we're so proud to be sponsoring the podcast because I think
Yes.
forgiveness is just such a great part of what we do here at the Mango Girl.
Thank you so very much. Thank you, Dr. Brown. I love you. And I'm saying to all of you, my listeners and viewers, I'm sending you all love, light, and upliftment. And we're talking about what the world needs, but what do you need?